rugby allowed me to live again. When you're being chased around the field by South Africans, you just can't think of what's going on.
Hello and welcome back to 40-Minute Mentor, your weekly dose of pocket-sized career mentorship. Over the years, I've had the massive honour of meeting some of my sporting heroes on this podcast. One of them is England Rugby legend, broadcaster and journalist, Will Greenwood MBE. Will is one of the greatest English rugby players of all time, playing 55 times for England, representing the British and Irish Lions on multiple tours. As any rugby fan will know, he played a fundamental role in England's 2003 Rugby World Cup winning team. In this episode, we'll dig into Will's rugby career and all his amazing successes, learn more about how he made the successful transition into broadcasting and entrepreneurship, and hear about the importance of mentorship throughout his career. So whether you're a rugby fan or not, I can guarantee this episode has amazing mentorship for everybody looking to build resilience and get further ahead in their career. I really hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Will, thank you so much for joining us on the 40-Minute Mentor today. I'd like to kick this off, as we always do, with a 30-second overview of your CV, if that's all right.
Oh, so me, I was excited then. I thought you were going to do a 30-second
I'm
overview
going to give
of
you
me.
the power.
I'm going to give you the power to do it.
Okay, well, before I do that, I want you to tell me 5 things you know about me.
5 things. You put me on the spot here. I know you've got over 50 caps for England at rugby. You went on 3 Lions tours.
2.
You are a world-class analyst and legend in broadcasting. And also you spent some time working in a bank earlier in your career. Is that 4? Okay, 1 more. And your dad used to be an international rugby player as well.
5. Nice work. Perfect. So what else do you need to know? Born in Blackburn, son of 2 teachers, went to Durham University, studied economics. Or as my dad said, I read rugby and played economics. And I went to HSBC. Actually, I joined Midland Global Markets.
Okay.
And it's all in the news at the moment because, of course, what's going on in Hong Kong, HSBC bought Midland Global Markets, I think, 93, 94, about the time I joined.
Mm-hmm.
And I did 3 years in the city, traded foreign exchange and futures, rugby turned professional. I was going to stay trading futures. And my dad said, don't be a fool. Don't be the bloke at the end of the bar who says you could have been. So I asked the bank for a 2-year sabbatical. Said if I haven't played for rugby for England within 2 years, I will come back. And they said, no problem. I played rugby for England within a year. I was fortunate to be in a great team at Leicester and got picked on the Lions tour. Stayed with rugby, finished rugby, went into journalism. I've written my own articles for the Telegraph for 16 years, written a couple of books. I got picked up by Sky. I did okay on the first show, so they invited me back. And 17 years later, they're still inviting me back. And in amongst that, I've founded a couple of businesses that I sort of run on the side and are hugely enjoyable to be involved in sport, and which is my passion, and delivering sporting holidays, either in festivals or holiday format. I think that's about it.
That's amazing.
Dr. Will Greenwood MBE. It's amazing what they'll give you when you win a World Cup. And I have more nicknames that you can poke a stick at.
Excellent. What is your favourite nickname or the most obscure?
I was Shaggy, the cartoon character, although I had a shave today for 10 to 15 years. I was known as Barry Chuckle until my tash went this morning. And my the one most people know me for, because the story's being told in the World Cup quarter-final in 2003, as I trudged off at half-time getting beaten by the Welsh, a group of Pontypool supporters christened me Rodney Trotter.
Very good. Well, that's an honour. That's an honour to be to get that nickname. Well, thank you for that. There's so much there. It's definitely, we're not going to have enough time to cover it all, but you've had an incredible career, and I'd love to delve into some aspects of it. But starting, you mentioned your dad, who I know himself was a fantastic rugby player. I'm interested, what impact did he have on you growing up? Did you ever feel the kind of pressure to follow in his footsteps?
Great question. Brother, sister, we just grew up. We went to Grandad's Caravan in the Lake District. We went to Uncle Ian's place in North Wales, where the promenade was out the front. We had, in the boot, there would be golf clubs, rugby ball, football, tennis ball. Dad, as a teacher and as an ex-England coach, could create games out of nothing, just immense imagination, as did my mum, who was a math teacher and a badminton coach. So everything was always not necessarily competitive, but there was always an element of learning, of wanting to delve and tweak and adapt and see what we could take from what's relevant from maths, what can we take from maths and put it into rugby, what can we take from cricket, and what works in there. So constantly trying to upskill and develop and be better. But there was no pressure really to play rugby to a high level. My old man said, look, in your own time, but the second you knock on my door and say I want help, then I play by his rules. So it was about 15, 16, I went to him, I'd like to be a bit better. And I went, all right, I'll see you on the promenade at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. And bang.
And the beasting began.
That's where it started. So my biggest fans are my Telegraph articles, and my mum, when it goes in the paper on Saturday, still 16 years later, the newspaper boy will deliver it. At 1 minute past 8, she'll have read it and she'll have said, I'm not sure about that. You've overcomplicated that and done this. And then I'll get the analytical point of view from my dad at about 9:30. And if I go on TV, if I use the same superlative or the same adverb or the same adjective too many times, I get a little text, check my phone at half time, stop saying excellent, stop saying wonderful, don't dither, you're speaking too fast, William. So that's sort of the bubble that I've grown up in.
Got it. Incredible. And like me, my parents are both teachers, and I think there's something about teaching, having teacher parents, that can bring the best out of you in that way. So that sound like particularly your dad, clearly it sounded like you had to come to him for when you decided that you were going to take it further. Was that the moment of realization in those teenage years that you could go international?
No chance. No, I just loved it. Just really liked it. I was sort of dropped from the under 15 A's at my school. We got beat by Bradford Grammar 70-0. At the time I was playing fullback. And the following week the team went up on the board, and I thought, well, there'll be a few changes this week and I might be under pressure, And I was the only one that was dropped. I mean, Mr. Bennett blamed 70-0 defeat on the fullback missing all the tackles.
Shame on you, Mr. Bennett.
My point might have been, what about the 14 blokes in front of me doing the square root of Jeff Hall there? So, no, at the time it was just... And the reality is, I sort of say, my dad said, look, wait until you're ready and come and knock on the door. The reality was I'd always hopped in the car on a Tuesday and Thursday night and gone down to Preston Grasshoppers and run around on the back pitches, and I'd always been playing Monday night football. It's strange now, in the current environment, a 14, 15-year-old is not allowed to be on a rugby field with adults, or really on a sports pitch with adults, health and safety, and rightly so, I understand all that. But in the old days, I felt safe. I felt as though Dad wasn't putting me in any unnecessary danger. The football became sort of full contact with these old buffers when you nip round them, but it wasn't meant to be. And the rugby, I was never involved in the full contact till I was about 17. Okay. But I was always in and around older people, trying to glean bits of information and play alongside. And being the skinny kid at the time, my nickname was Twiggy, and then it became Stickman. I had to survive on my wits around these sort of firemen who played for Preston Grasshoppers in the front row of a 20 stone, or Wade Dooley was there, or Paul Grayson, who went on to play for England at fly half, was there, and John Chesworth is a superstar in Division 4 in the centre. I was just had to duck, dodge, weave, go alongside, use my complementary skills to make them look better and work alongside them and be accepted. So it really was a sink or swim mentality, but I loved that challenge, and I had the mentality that I'll go again next Thursday, Dad, or can't wait till next Tuesday. And I used to rinse them on the fitness because I weighed about 35 kilos.
I can imagine.
I can run a decent 400. So they used to get really irritated and then chase me around the park.
I can imagine. Well, I guess your career kind of continued to blossom, and then I guess that rugby at that time wasn't professional. And you mentioned working at HSBC. So how did you combine the banking career with rugby? And I guess when was the point that you decided actually, I'm going to go pro?
Yeah. So I wasn't a rogue at university, but I wouldn't say I overworked. I wouldn't say I came out of there feeling as though I'd had my nose to the grindstone or shoulder to the wheel for 3 years of just studying John Maynard Keynes and capitalist theory on the free market. I just about understood the supply and demand curve. I always remember there's always a theory, the Black-Scholes theorem. I have no idea what it is, but it sounds uber cool.
It sounds good, yeah.
I arrived in the city and a friend of mine was playing at Harlequins at the time. So I got a phone call from Harlequins and they said, look, we'd like to come play here and we can offer you free membership at the gym in the city called the Broadgate Club. I was like, wow, free gym membership. And you imagine I'm an ex-student going down to live in London, living in Clapham, rent.
That's all it takes, yeah.
That was all it was. So I signed up there. So what that meant was I would train at the gym after work every Monday and Wednesday. I always knew my routine. I'd know the shop I'd stop off and pick up some a sandwich straight after and some mince, head home and cook a bolognese or some fish. Get home about 10 o'clock on a Monday or a Wednesday in the evening. And Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'd jump on a train at about 5:30 from Waterloo down to Twickenham, walk to the Stoop, train, thumb a lift back from one of the lads, get home about 11. You know, I'm not asking for violins here, but it was work all day, get up at 5:30, train after work every day, never go to the pub with the lads. Like, oh, come on. So no, got, you know, occasionally in the summer, a couple of beers, but during the season, Friday head home, either to an away game, jump on a train up north to Orrell or wherever it might be, or chill at home and watch Friends on the telly. Saturday play, drink far too much, end up in Infernos in Clapham.
Oh, classic.
Sleep, the theatre more actually, in Wandsworth was probably more my place.
Okay.
And end up sleeping all day Sunday, iron 5 shirts, cut, copy, paste, repeat, 2.5 years. Basically what I did, and loved it. And the guys in the city initially thought I was a bit weird. Like, what are you doing that for? You don't get paid for it. Why would you do that? And it's just, I just love doing it. And it gave me a real focus. I wouldn't say I was institutionalized by boarding school, but I sort of like to have my days super full. And that's what happened. And then with Jonah Lomu and Nelson Mandela and Francois Pienaar on the World Cup in 1995, there was this mad rush to turn rugby professional in the following 12 months. And when it did, as I said, I contemplated not turning professional, staying in the city, because the first contract I was offered for at Quins was a third of what I was earning in the city. So it just didn't make any financial sense. So I turned them down. Leicester Tigers found out about it. Peter Wheeler, the old England hooker, jumped in a car, met me at the hotel on the Strand. We sort of had a couple of drinks. He put an offer on the table a couple of days later, and about 3 weeks later, I was jumping in my C-Reg Mini Metro, driving up to live in Leicester, where on night one, I met my now wife. On night one. Unbelievable. In a terrible nightclub, called Luxor's, dancing with Austin Healey.
Wow. What a story. Night one. Well, it was fate. It was clearly meant to be.
And she hated me.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
I was so drunk, and she was driving all her mates, of which I'm now busy friends with. But it's amazing how everything happens so quickly.
Your drunken charms worked eventually. Well, within a year of you joining Leicester, you were in the England side. You then went on the British Lions tour.
Wrong order. I wasn't in the England side.
Was it Lions first?
Yeah, I was lucky. I was the last. I am the last non-capped player to go on a Lions tour. No one's done it since.
I did not realise that. Amazing. Wow.
So the Lions picked me first, and then England. I got my first cap for England in November of 97, having already been on an 8-week Lions tour in the summer of 97.
Wow, incredible. Well, I think our listeners will be really interested in kind of the road from turning pro to getting those international honours. Kind of what are some, it obviously is an incredible achievement, but probably a lot of us don't know what actually it takes in terms of sacrifices, both personally and professionally. Can you tell us a bit about that kind of period of time?
Yeah, look, it's really interesting. Again, you do hear all these interviews after someone wins Olympic gold or whatever, and they put into context this Herculean style work, and they've made the challenge into sort of Sisyphean, impossible challenge that no one else could possibly. And I think most of it is we don't want other people to try because it's so much fun. It's like the training is like a drug, and I get it's not for all, but the hard work and the graft is actually what we love. Falling off the rowing machines or the bike actually creates those endorphins, that dopamine, whatever it is that we crave. So genetically, I'm predisposed to those sorts. Over the corner of my island, the watt bike is winking at me because I've got a session in a couple of hours. I know what it is. It's going to really hurt, but I'm really looking forward to it. So the sacrifice, I think, is. I think actually it comes on the personal level. So my wife on 6 consecutive summers, went to all the weddings without me because I was always on tour. I worked a lot of weekends at the time. So weirdly enough, at times like these. I've got a load of friends, but your mates have accumulated into little clusters around which they've been used to hanging around within their 20s. So even though I'm close with them all, then perhaps on occasion you're on the periphery of the group. So it's quite an interesting. So actually, I look back on it now and go, at the time the sacrifices were none. I'd say for me, I didn't understand the sacrifice my wife was, in sticking with me, going to all these places and events and parties solo. And, later in life, it's interesting how it may have had a sort of unintended consequence from the sacrifice that wasn't a sacrifice, if you know what I mean, at the time. So, yeah, look, there were undoubtedly times when you did miss some great events, but I also got to score a hat-trick at the Millennium Stadium when I played in a World Cup final. So you tell me now, it's a pretty small sacrifice to pay to go through feelings and experiences like that.
No, I can imagine. And it's a perfect segue into talking about the 2003 World Cup. I'm a lifelong avid fan, and I remember it very well. I'd come from a fundraiser for my rugby tour to New Zealand the night before, and I think I'd snuck a couple of beers, and we all woke up to watch it, and I just can't even begin to imagine what it was like being a part of that. I'd love to just know what it was like on that day, before the game. How did you approach that? And can you tell our listeners a little bit about what that experience was like, actually winning a World Cup, and what the impact has been on your life subsequently?
Yeah, so, again, I've got to sort of contextualise things a little bit. During the World Cup, I flew home. My wife was in intensive care. We lost a little baby boy, Freddie, in the September of 2002. So my mind at the time was just a ridiculous roller coaster at a time when you're meant to be really calm. And I'd flown home. I was exhausted in amongst it, but I wouldn't have wanted to be anywhere else. I'd gone home. My wife had said, "You got to go back. You got to play." So it was almost Cara that sent me back. I went back, and rugby allowed me to live again. When you're being chased around the field by South Africans, you just can't think of what's going on back home. You just got to stay alive.
It's a distraction almost,
in the moment. And then it got to World Cup final week, and you could compartmentalize it a little bit and understand that the biggest battle going on in my life necessarily wasn't taking place in Australia. It was going on at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, and my wife was doing an amazing job. So it allowed me to stay relatively relaxed and calm for the start of the week. But I mean, by the time it got to Friday, I was a nervous wreck, like a lot of the players. You didn't want to let the country down. We'd gone as favourites to the World Cup. Australia knocked out New Zealand, who potentially were the side that had the most chance of turning us over. So you're going into final red-hot favourites, which is, you end up then maybe not playing and expressing yourself as much as you would. You'd almost just shadow boxing to keep them at arm's length. That gets you in trouble. Anyway, but that's later on in the game. And then on the game, I mean, the game didn't kick off till 7:30. It's the longest day of my life.
I bet, yeah.
So I went back to bed about 3 times, crashed out, just couldn't, the day couldn't end fast enough. And then weirdly enough, once you're on the bus on the way to the stadium and you get off the bus, you're in the change, you didn't want the game to end. You didn't want the day to end. You wanted to stop, pause, live in this moment forever, because you're sort of on the edge of your Everest, and everything you'd always wanted to do was right there. And the game, I hardly remember blowing a thing about. I mean, it just goes so quickly.
Yeah.
And luckily, I say luckily, we spent sort of 4 years. Actually, one of our phrases was removing luck, so that no matter how the ball bounced, what the weather did, how many injuries we got, whether the referee took a shine to us or not, then we would find a way to have more points than the opposition come the final whistle. And I think that's what was the great differentiator of that England team to many that have followed from many different nations that haven't quite managed to transition from a good team into a great team, was our ability to never allow ourselves to be consigned to fate, to always believe it was in our hands.
That's it's very inspiring. I mean, did you
Now that this has happened, you've had a chance to reflect on it. It obviously had a huge impact on your life, and I can imagine the celebrations were incredible. But what are your reflections now? You look back on that, having achieved what is the ultimate, achievement in a career.
Yeah, I think a group of lads who were okay. We didn't storm through the Northern Hemisphere season. We had, not all of us went in '98, but some of the lads went, and we lost to Australia 76-0. No Northern Hemisphere side had ever sort of won the World Cup, and at the time we didn't know that would remain so until potentially 2023. And yet we found this sort of hardcore Praetorian old guard collective that stayed pretty constant for those 4 or 5 years behind this unbelievable moonshot, nutty professor, innovator, preacher that was Clive Woodward, that always filled our sails and never allowed us to believe anything but glory would be ours. And finding our way and navigating our way through some pretty tough times. I talked about some of the lads also had some pretty really horrific experiences off the field that they had to come through, personal problems. And then this, on the back of that, this ability to keep getting back up and going. One defeat doesn't make us a poor team, but at the same time, when we won big and won well, we didn't suddenly believe we were world beaters. So we had a really calm. We were, I teach a little bit of maths. We were sort of like a sine curve, but a normal sine curve, no multiplier effect. It wasn't 3 sine x plus 3 that goes up to 4 and down to -4. It's sort of just like an oscillating wheel. Every now and again having some peaks and troughs, and we were prepared to ride out the rough stuff, knowing that we were only ever one game away from heading back up the curve, and we tried to maintain the top of the curve as long as possible when we could.
There was clearly a very strong culture within that team, and you mentioned Clive Woodward had very strong leaders, yourself, Martin Johnson, obviously the captain, and Johnny Wilkinson. What do you think made that culture, and what lessons do you think that anyone listening that is leading a team, whether it's in a sporting sense or a business one, what are the lessons to be learned from that?
Wow, in a 40-minute chat. I mean, you need to get involved in some of my team building days, and I'll give you the full 8-hour version.
We will do that.
In a nutshell, I mean, you can really simplify it. A real understanding of a difference between good and bad banter. A real understanding, a moral and ethical line that the lads understood of what could be delivered as constructive feedback. But at the flip side, what overstepped the mark and what was ill-disciplined, negative, energy-sapping, barbed comments. There was an ability with an incredible work ethic, a real relentless consistency. People talk about trusting your instinct, right? But if you trust your instinct without having total control of your basics, then to me, that's just gambling.
Yeah.
Everyone. I mean, I can see a 25-yard shot in the Premier League outside the box. I'm going to have a dig at that. You haven't practiced it a million times and know exactly how it's like to fly off the foot. Michael Jordan talks about the 9,000 shots that he missed. But you get back to our team, the real self-policing within the organisation, a real delegation of power, of leadership from Clive to understand that our purpose was to win a World Cup. The way we would win that would be to be strong in our world-class behaviours, attack, defence, scrums, lineouts, but actually his delegation to say, look, this is what we've got to be good at in order to achieve that, but you're going to work out how we're going to be good at that. Yeah. And handing over that ability to allow us. So I've often talked about a great deal of freedom within a framework. And so I've sort of listed 3 or 4 things there that can create this culture, strong on and off the pitch, hugely supportive of each other, very family orientated, very honest and open dialogue, real, collision rich environment in terms of dialogue in our meeting room, but that was built on the fact that it was always about the betterment of the squad as opposed to propelling individual roles and purposes within the organisation. So as I said, there's not necessarily a binary answer with one thing that did it. It was a whole heap of initiatives, the support of our brains, i.e. the amount of different innovators that Clive got in to come in to stimulate our brains that would just have us exploring different avenues to fixing the same problems, argue, fight tooth and nail, work out the best one we thought it was, and then total alignment behind the one we chose, having had a really good platform of discussion and debate about which one might or might not be the right route.
Yeah.
This wasn't a case of having too many captains or too many chefs. This was understanding about you're given a voice. If you're given a voice, then the quality of listening in the room goes through the roof. If the quality of listening goes in the roof, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then you know you've got a voice, and you're all in and you're all on it. And there's really, I did a podcast recently, I had Damien Lewis on, and he really articulated this really well. In terms of acting, if you really, really, really listen, then you get totally improvised, unplanned, nuanced reactions to everything that's said, and it's a true reflection of what's going on, as opposed to the old classic Blue Peter, I've made a cake, here's one I prepared earlier, and whatever you said, I'm eating this cake.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's some real amazing parallels there with some of the best clients that we work with, and the CEOs and the teams, and a lot of the best ones have a very clear vision and mission, and they're very strong leaders themselves, but they also empower others beneath them to make decisions for themselves, to make mistakes, but to learn from them. But that kind of being unified by one goal and all buying into it, I think is very powerful. Well, thank you for those insights. I think people find those really fascinating. But I want to talk a bit about post-rugby career, because you've gone on to have an amazing career as a broadcaster and an analyst with Sky Sports and obviously the Telegraph, as you mentioned earlier. Why did you choose to make that move into the media post-rugby? And can you tell us a little bit about some of the obstacles you had to overcome to do that?
Why did I make that move? I think the World Cup happened, I was 31 years old. I managed to cling on for another couple of years and grind it out, probably because of the city had changed. I mean, the crash hadn't happened then, but the city I'd left in 96 was very different. And I say that a bit, and what am I saying? You generally had to work for a living, whereas in 96 there was a whole host of corporate functions where deals were done where it wasn't necessarily the best client or the best offer that won the day. It was what level of hospitality you may or may not have received, allegedly, I say, alongside all these things. And I'd started to scribble for the Telegraph. I used to have a deal with another paper that shall remain nameless, but basically it was a ghosted piece. And I'd do the interview after the game on Saturday. And then I'd open the paper on the Sunday, and it had nothing to do with what I'd said. So I gave my friend and my agent an earful every week, and he said, will you stop moaning, take the money, or we'll rip the deal up and we'll go and find you somewhere else to write for. And I said, well, no one writes their own. He said, well, zag when they're zig. Be different. Yeah. So I sort of started, I think I had like 300 words a week in the Metro, which might just have been launching then. And then I did a short stint at the FT, actually. So I wrote for the FT briefly. And then I met a guy called Keith Perry at the Telegraph, and he said, yeah, I'll take a chance. I'll take your pieces. You got a file every Saturday. You got 1,000 words to do, and I'll have 50 of them in year one. It's like, wow, blank sheet of paper, 50,000 words. The 10,000 word dissertation that took me 3 years to write at university suddenly didn't seem too bad. So I fell into that. I've been invited as a guest when I was injured at Sky to fill the studio. And when I finished, a guy called Martin Turner there said, do you want 10 goes a year? So I started with 10 and it moved on from there. So I wouldn't say it was a sort of global master plan. I wasn't Dr. No or Max Blofeld in any way, shape or form with a global domination theory. I was just pootling along and thinking, I really enjoy sport. I love being sidelined. I love the analysis of the game. And I love staying involved in the game. And it sort of grew from there. I mean, in the end, it almost, unfortunately, I say this in a strange way, and I still love what I do, but it's made it very difficult to ever leave and go do other stuff, which I've always had this sort of desire to itch and scratch elsewhere. But here I am, still working for Sky and the Telegraph, sort of 17 years later. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of, and you're of an age that actually remembers it, the vast majority of people I now sort of watch, certainly watching the telly. The Telegraph is slightly different because of the age demographic. But the vast majority wouldn't even know I played. They just, I hope, quite like listening to the way I talk about the game.
Yeah.
And my view on it, and the fact that I believe and I hope it's relevant. And that's the transition that's been quite an enjoyable one to make. But it's been built on the same work ethic that I had before, which was sort of trying to be the best at things that require no talent. And what requires no talent is just watching game after game after game after game, being ready to react on a Monday, having watched all the games from the weekend already, if you needed to do a piece.
Yeah.
And to be able to critique players, because it is their jobs, you have to remember. It's not just our plaything that we can abuse and criticise in a sort of clickbait format. There are players and wives and parents and they're doing their best. So being able to talk about it and articulate it in a way that doesn't offend, but at the same time is critical when it needs to be done has been a big challenge. But it's one a line I hope I never cross is in any ways anything personal or barbed or nasty. And a lot of that was taught to me by the squad I played with.
No, interesting. Yeah, and certainly doesn't come across that as that. I'm a big fan of you at your role as an analyst, and I think your passion and enthusiasm for the game seems to be just as strong as it was when you were playing for England. So I think that is something that I think fans of the game love to see. And it's not just the media. You've set up your own business. You mentioned in travel and events with Austin Healey. You've gone on to do lots of things, but a lot of sports people and actually just professionals in general, when they're transitioning out of something that they've loved and done and into something different, it's not always an easy thing to do. So for those listening who maybe rugby players come to the end of their career or just people looking to transition, what things would you advise them to think about to set themselves up for success sort of in the next part?
I think the greatest fear is fear itself. I think that's Theodore Roosevelt may have said that in the 30s. Yeah, I picked it up from my mum and dad. They were never afraid to fail. They were never afraid to end up with egg on their face, as long as they knew they'd committed wholeheartedly to something and done of their best. Then not everything works. And I've often used the Dr. Pepper phrase. What's the worst that can happen? And I'm throwing a lot of quotes here, but I have to remind myself of them a lot. So one of them is, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
Have a go, try it. And the other one that's come to me sort of a lot later in life in terms of reading is, if you only tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. And that was sort of Mark Twain. And so I try and be really consistent in everything I do. I try to, say no as many times as you say yes and try and pick the right project. No ruinous empathy, have real radical candor, and I'm sure some of you will have read that book about the things I do. And if it's going wrong, know when to cut the rope early and walk away. And when it's going well, double down and go again. But don't assume that what you've done will allow that double down to have the same multiplier effect. It might need to reinvent. And so I think it's is there a film with Will Smith called The Constant Pursuit of Happiness?
Yes.
Well, there's something like that. Something like that. Well, one of the things in the book I'm writing at the moment, I'm sort of trying to filter it down into what I'm talking about. And I think what I'm after is the sort of constant pursuit of better. Not wanting to be perfect. Not wanting to win every game. Not wanting for every decision to go my way. Not wanting for every prediction for the newspaper or on the telly to be right and become a know-all in any way, shape or form. But actually just continue to expand horizons, listen, learn from other walks of life, explore the one percenters and the unintended positive consequences and negative consequences that occasionally come with certain actions, but always with the understanding that it's what I say to my lads on a training field down my local club, and I sort of apply it to my life. What I say to them is, I'm not expecting any of you to be the next Jason Robinson, but let's leave the field today in an hour and a half, just slightly better
Yeah, it's great
than right
advice.
now. And I try to finish each day just slightly better. Doesn't always work, right? Doesn't always get like that, but that's the plan.
I think that's something we can all learn from. No, thank you. Well, we're coming towards the end of the conversation, but there's a couple of things I just really wanted to touch on that I think our listeners will be interested in. And you've described yourself as a grassroots man through and through. You've done lots of work with various organisations, the School of Hard Knocks and others to help, I guess, youngsters, perhaps those from underprivileged backgrounds, secure future employment, opportunities, etc. Why is that important to you? And to anyone that's listening, maybe running a company, thinking about what more they can do to help those sorts of young people, what's your advice for them?
I certainly don't want to be Bob Geldof here and say, give us your chuffing money. But I would employ you or in a position of, you don't even need to be a position of seniority in any organisation. I'd be saying, why wouldn't you want to contribute on a societal level with the experience and knowledge and wisdom that you've garnered over your 25, 30, 35, however many years it is you've been grafting away? Why would you want to keep it to yourself? And I am by no means I'm not an evangelist, and there are certain things that I do which I think are hopefully pretty altruistic and selfless, but there's a whole host of it where I'm, trying to accumulate some money to look after myself when I get a little bit older. So but there's always plenty of time to do it. And maybe it's just slightly easier for sport. I certainly don't want to judge. Maybe it's easier for me as an ex-pro with a mouthpiece and a sort of social media following and a business support to be able to stick my name to things and beat that drum and people to sort of dance to the beat for a month or so and then they move on. But my view would be, again, without sort of being too long-winded and going back to the start, is giving back it's so not selfless because it's so much fun doing it. So by definition, it's not a selfless act. Being generous of spirit, I don't think there's any better feeling. And whether it was at School of Hard Knocks or going to the North Pole raising money for premature birth research, or just down my local rugby club, people say, "What? You're at level 5? What are you doing down there?" Because I love it, and the club love it. So we're both. It's win-win.
Yeah, it's a win-win. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I guess there's something prevalent for right now with the Black Lives Matter movement at the forefront of many minds at the moment. I'd just love to get your view on what the RFU could do more to increase black representation in rugby, because it's something that I've thought about for a while. I went to a very multicultural school, and I think it's a missed opportunity, in my opinion.
Yeah, look, I think on the field, and by the way, I'm no apologist here, but I think it's always good to actually just sit back a second and go, how are we on the playing side? Certainly the men's game, I think 10 of the World Cup final squad of 23 were a BAME. Again, I was clumsy, but I'm earnestly clumsy. Is it BAME origin? Do you talk about? Is it what do you say?
I think BAME backgrounds.
BAME background. I think in the women's game, that representation is not strong enough yet. So we need to explore ways to get into areas of society whereby we make it more welcoming. I think certainly on the LGBT side, I think rugby is a pretty good place to be around. And I've worked with a couple of teams and organisations within this sector. But again, I'm only giving one side. There might be someone screaming at the camera going, "Don't be, I've been discriminated against," for which I don't. One discrimination is too many. I think one of the serious obstacles is potentially in the leadership level, in the council level, that when we begin to understand that I think the council is 55 and there's one woman and there's one person, there's one black person, and they're the same. That's Maggie Alfonsi. It must be, and you can't be what you can't see.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there is a danger of asking the old guard to ask the turkeys to vote for Christmas. So
Yeah.
I'm not trying to in any way underplay it or in any way make a comment that would be misrepresented in terms of making a joke out of it. But the reality is it is so far down one spectrum that I think supporting Maggie in her campaign to become president of the RFU, I always forget whether it's RFU or England Rugby, but if Maggie Alfonsi could become the president, and what a message that would send for the British and Irish Lions. You've got to pick the right captain, but why wouldn't it be Maro Itoje tossing the coin next year with Sia Khaleesi? I mean, wow, what a statement that is. But
absolutely.
And it would be a thoroughly deserved role on the back of his performances. But
absolutely.
Look, we've just got to, I do believe, I do believe, that's too strong. I hope that rugby is seen by anyone who goes down to their local rugby club as a place of welcome, where was what it definitely is it's the greatest sport in the world for any particular body shape or size. Everyone has a role to play in the game of rugby, from your physical and to a degree mental capacity, your cognitive diversity, because of what's required in the front or in the back. So I'm hoping on the back of that, then that is a sort of seamless transition to eradicating any potential obstacle that you might have with your sexuality or race or colour or creed.
Thanks, Will. No, it's really, really great to get your thoughts on that. And I think it's an important thing for us to discuss. But yeah, I totally agree, and I'm all behind
and
Maggie.
I sit here, look, I'm not an idiot, right? I'm not an idiot. I'm possibly the least diverse person you're ever going. I'm sort of 47-year-old, white, privately educated rugby player. I mean, I get it, but
you have a following, Will. Yeah, and I think it's important. It's really important to hear people like you say these sorts of things, and I think that'll be really respected by our listeners for sure. Well, thank you very much, Will. We are pretty much at the end. I've got 3 wrap-up questions for you. First one is around mentorship, the power of mentorship. Do you have a mentor? Or how's mentorship impacted your career?
Yeah, so so do I have someone in particular? No. Do I have 5 or 6 people? 2 of them really close friends, which you might say, well, they can't really be a mentor, but actually, trust me, when they baptise me with feedback, they properly baptise me with feedback. And then 3 or 4 from different walks of life and organisations that I can call upon and chat through and talk about and come up with solutions and plans, then yes. So whilst I may not have a personal coach, that would be the one-word monosyllabic answer. No, that is so far from the real picture of my existence and life when it comes to seeking out help and support from a whole host of different sources on School of Hard Knocks.
Good stuff. Mentorship does come in different forms, and I think the main advice is to seek it out. So that really backs that up. And what does the next sort of year look like for you? I know you're a very busy man. What are some of the goals and aims for the year ahead?
Yeah, so from a journalistic side and sporting side, I can't wait for sport to resume. I'm continuing to work for Sky and the Daily Telegraph, which gives me a fantastic platform to branch out into other areas. From a business perspective, we are hoping that when you sort of, I've laughed about owning a sort of luxury travel company based out of Italy, then COVID wasn't necessarily the best piece of business fortune we had, but we've done okay. We'll be all right. We'll be around next year, so hopefully we can relaunch some of the offerings we have there. We're looking into some domestic festivals, sporting festivals as well. Really excited about a book I've written in lockdown with my great friend Ben Fennell, who was CEO of an advertising agency called BBH for 16 years. We've got lots of ideas about how we can make that so much more than just a book and one simple offering. So we're working hard on that to bring that to life. And then what's really important to me as well is to continue to coach and support my local rugby club as often as I can on a Tuesday and Thursday. and bizarrely enough, continue to do a couple of days a week volunteer maths teaching at a school down the road, because I know it sounds strange, but I blooming love maths.
And the final question, Will, for any of our listeners thinking about a big career move right now, what final piece of advice would you leave them with?
Oh, I mean, you can't beat Dr. Pepper. You know, what's the worst that can happen?
Love that. Love that. Amazing. I think we will leave it there with Dr. Pepper. Will, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for giving up your time for this. We wish you all the very best. And yeah, anyone listening, go check out Will's book when it lands. I certainly will. We wish you all the very best for the year ahead. Thanks for being a great mentor.
Take care.
Cheers, Will.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I really hope that you found it useful and inspiring. If we have left any questions unanswered, or if you have any feedback or guest recommendations for future series, then please make sure you get in touch on info@jbmc.co.uk. I often get asked by listeners how you can help us spread the word about 40 Minute Mentor. There are two simple ways you can help. Firstly, share this episode on your preferred social media platform, and LinkedIn is probably where I'm most likely to see it. And you can also leave us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Every share on social media and review left on the podcast platforms really helps us to get 40 Minute Mentor in front of new audiences and share the power of mentorship even further. Thank you so much for your ongoing support, and I look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday for even more pocket-sized mentorship.